He's talking about who he is and how we can understand who he is and how we can appropriate who he is into our lives so that we can live higher than this earthly existence, so we can live in a heavenly existence.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to our continuing conversation on the book of Revelations as we go through and lay out an overview of each chapter. We are thankful that you guys have joined us and appreciate that. And we're continuing on our conversation this evening, starting in chapter 5. We left off in chapter 4. So I'm here with Roger Roth, and I'm Kevin Meyer. And again, we're from Active Living Ministries. And just invite you to participate in this conversation. We're taking a look at the book of Revelations, perhaps from a different perspective than we've traditionally heard through our Christian experience. And this is a result of a study that we've been going through for the last number of months, and just thought we'd like to share that with you guys as we go through this. So, Roger, here we are. We talked about chapter 4 last week. Chapter 4 really was an introduction to the throne room.
Yes.
John had, we had went through the earlier chapters where John was given a message to all the different churches. Mm-hmm. And at the conclusion of those 7 churches, he is told to, he heard a voice saying, "Come up here." And we find that John enters into this throne room, this room in heaven, that he begins to look around and see some fascinating things. He sees some living creatures flying around. He sees some elders, and we talked about those last week. But here we are now, then going into chapter 5.
Yeah, chapter 5 and chapter 6 flow together. As I actually do chapter 4 and 5. In chapter 4, we, as you mentioned, had heard about the 4 living creatures and about the 24 elders. Now, we'll see them again in chapter 5 as we go through this. One of the interesting things about the entire book of Revelation is that it is in signs. So if you don't understand the signs, you don't understand the book. It's like if we were trying to take a trip somewhere, if we didn't understand the road signs, if we didn't understand the speed signs, if we didn't understand the city signs, we wouldn't know where we're at.
Right.
And it's the way it is with Revelation as well. So in chapter 4, we have the 4 living creatures making these pronunciations, these proclamations, about the holiness of the Lord, and then the 4 and 20 elders are bowing down. I find that interesting because there is something happening that is causing the elders to bow down.
Yes.
The pronunciation or proclamation is being made by the 4 living creatures. So we can look at these 24 elders and 4 living creatures in a number of ways as we do in our study. But one of the ways you can look at them is the 4 living creatures being compared to the Gospels. Mm-hmm. Because the 4 living creatures each had a face, mm-hmm. and each of those faces were indicative of, in the Old Testament, of the tribes that encamped mm-hmm. around the ark, around the tabernacle, and they were indicative of the 4 faces of God. And so basically the elders are bowing down every time they see something about God, every time something about God is proclaimed. And we see that carry on in chapter 5.
I agree. I find that to be a fascinating thing between these 2 chapters, 4 and 5, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I think, too, it's worth reminding people that our approach to understanding Revelation is not by looking externally for understanding of these signs and
yes.
these symbols. We are looking to Scripture itself to help us understand those. For example, when we talk about the beast or the antichrist, everybody is looking out into the world in which we live, and they've done this for centuries.
Sure.
Every generation does this. Who is the antichrist that's on the scene, or who is the beast that's on the scene? And what our approach is to look at what those references are in the Old Testament, and what that can tell us about these
Right.
things. So
And
yes.
how they're also described in the New Testament.
Yeah.
In the Gospels, from Jesus and his pronunciations, from the Apostle Paul, the Apostle Peter. The book of Revelations is actually quite easily understood if you use the Bible as your source.
Yes.
If you use historical references, if you use the latest writings or latest books, if you use the latest movies, that may lead you one way or another. But if you want to really understand the book of Revelations, it really isn't that difficult if you use the Bible as your source.
Yeah, and if you are approaching it from this perspective that the book of Revelation is about the revealing of Jesus Christ, it's not about the revealing of the Antichrist or the revealing of the beast and those types of things. It's about the revealing of Jesus Christ within us. This is what John's experience was, and I believe that this is what he is trying to share with us, is this process that takes place within us as we continue to understand our true identity of who we are in the earth. So,
Yeah, I was just reading through this briefly. Obviously, we have a study where we go verse by verse,
Yeah.
and we have written material and so on as well. So we're just giving a brief overview here. But as you read through chapter 5, saw on the right hand of one who sat on the throne a book that was written inside and out. And so there's this book. It's written, but it's not opened. What does mean not opened? It's not understood. It's not like this book is somehow locked up, and if we just had someone to break the lock, we could. No, it's about a book that isn't being understood. It hasn't been opened, but there is somebody who can open it. Now, John is pretty upset
Yes.
and taken back and mournful because there's nobody in heaven or earth, he says. Nobody in heaven or earth who can open this book, who can get us into it. And he knows there must be something of great significance in it. Isn't that the way it is a lot of times with the things of God? You know they're really powerful. You know they're really wonderful. But you have to understand them to appropriate them. And John is seeing that, and he is weeping. There's nobody able to open the book. But then what happens?
Well, then he sees the Lamb. He sees that there is one. He's told, "Do not weep." Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Referencing Christ, who has prevailed to be able to open the seals, to open this book. So it begs the question: prevailed in what sense? What did he prevail? I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, he was able to open the book, not for himself, because basically he is the book.
Yeah.
Jesus is the book. But he was able to open that book. It's the revealing of Jesus Christ, right? It's the opening of Jesus. It's the understanding of Jesus that he is giving to us. So he's opening the book, and then in verse 6 he says, "And behold, lo, in the midst of the throne and of the four beasts or the living creatures, in the midst of the elders stood a lamb that was slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God." Now, okay, Jesus is depicted many ways in this book. Remember in chapter 1 where he's depicted with the hair like wool, and he had the feet like brass, and his eyes were. Then, as you just read earlier, he's depicted as a lamb. Then he's depicted as a lion. Now he's depicted as one having these horns, right? And 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God. But then if we go back to chapter 4, verse 6, "And before the throne there was a sea of glass like unto crystal, and round about the throne were 4 beasts full of eyes ahead and behind." So he goes and he talks about that. And then he connects it with chapter 1, where he talked about the lamp of God being the
Right.
church, right? Here he's in the midst of these four living creatures and the 24 elders. In chapter 1, he's in the middle of the church. And then they have these seven eyes, which are the seven lamps, which are indicative of the light that is on each of these churches. It becomes pretty understandable as you go through, if you put line upon line, precept upon precept, exactly what he's talking about here. He's not talking about some great cataclysmic event that is going to happen in the earth, not that there aren't those events that happen. He's talking about who he is and how we can understand who he is and how we can appropriate who he is into our lives so that we can live higher than this earthly existence, so we can live in a heavenly existence.
Yes, I agree. And the seven spirits, we had talked about that in a previous episode. To me, it's from Isaiah when it talks about the seven spirits of God. And this is something that's happening within us. So there is this happening within us that has the elements of the seven spirits of God, the seven eyes of God that inform us, about this nature that is unveiling within us. It instructs us. There is a way to walk, right? There is this way in which to go. And I believe that these seven spirits are given to us for that discernment process of living this out within our own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Every number has significance in the Bible. So when we hear the number 7, we're thinking of a fullness or a completion of something. So he's not talking that God has 7 spirits.
Right.
Now we got God, but now God is divided into 7 spirits. He's talking about the fullness of the Spirit of God.
Amen, yeah.
So he's the Spirit of the Lord. He's the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, counsel and might, knowledge and fear of the Lord. He's all of that put together. That makes the Spirit of God. So he's talking about the various attributes of God, not that God is divided into 7 spirits.
Yes. Another interesting thing that I found in chapter 5 that links back to chapter 4 is after we see this Jesus Christ is able to take this scroll, and now when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, and they began to worship again. We see that same thing happen in chapter 4, where whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him, they fall down, right? So again, it's important not to see the book of Revelation as just this chronological story that's progressing through time. It's something that we're given a rendition of it over and over again. So I see this same thing happening again. So it tells us about what's actually going on in this throne room of heaven.
God is looking to take us to heaven.
Yeah.
Not
just
when you
we
die, right? He's looking to give us another realm experience, another realm understanding, another realm from which we can minister, another realm where we can take authority in this earth so that as it is in heaven, so it is in the earth. And so as we go through this book, he is showing us ways that we can access the higher realms of God, that we can actually, you see, to many Christians, it seems unbelievable, or it seems almost heretical to say that you can go to heaven before you die, or that you can have these heavenly encounters, or that you can meet with Jesus and have an exchange and an understanding, not something that is extra biblical, but something that is founded in the Bible and is confirmed by the Scripture, that you can actually have the experiences the individuals in the Bible had. So you say, well, yeah, that's for the Apostle Paul. Oh, yeah, that was, Joseph, Mary's husband, Jesus' foster father. Sure, he had those heavenly experiences, saw the angels and so on. But that was for those holy people, or that was for those people back then, not understanding that these things have happened, heavenly encounters have happened throughout the whole Bible, and they are available to everyone, just as they were to the people in the Word of God.
Yeah, I think we tend to put heaven as a destination, right?
Correct.
It's like the end point of where we're going to get to go, that kind of a thing.
Right.
As opposed to an experience. You know, it's the supernatural, it's the metaphysical, it's the thing beyond the physical realm, and it's just as real as it is, you know, this table that we're sitting around, and it's just as available to us. I think Western culture has a more difficult time embracing those types of ideas, but they are nonetheless true, whether we accept them or not. So again, what we're speaking about here is how do we access this? How do we come up, as John was saying, come up to this higher dimension, this higher realm of understanding and seeing things. And again, I just think chapter 5 is interesting because it's kind of a summary chapter of what's happened, because here the Lamb is, he takes the book, you know, he's the worthy one to take the book. And in that whole process, right, there is a response of the living creatures and the 24 elders falling down and casting down their crowns in chapter 5. So, and again, we see that played out over and over again. So I think what happens in this discussion in Revelation is it tells a story in a little bit, and then it tells it in greater detail, and then it tells it in even more greater detail as we progress through it. And that really is our Christian experience. You know, we have this initial time that we come to the Lord, and it's, you know, it's all contained in this little moment. But then there's this pursuit in our Christian walk, and not that we're attaining higher levels, you know, like Paul said, you know, not that I've attained anything,
right.
But it's this escalation, it's this deeper understanding, it's a more encompassed expression of the nature of God within us as we yield ourselves to that process working itself out. And John is giving us instruction into how that takes place.
Yeah, definitely. Perhaps in the next chapter, we'll talk a little further about the 24 elders, exactly who they are and how they operate within this, as well as the seals are going to be opened.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah. So what is the opening of the seals? We'll talk about that. It'll be interesting.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. If you want more information at the end of this video, there's a link for subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as an email that you can reach out to us and get more information. We have some studies put together and other information if you're interested in. We'd love to hear your input and your take on the book of Revelations. So thank you for joining us, and have a blessed day.
Yeah, thank you.